Freedom beyond boundaries, a deep dive into freedom from the known, conformity, conditioning, and the limits of thought, a path toward inner freedom. Indiana. Today's world, the idea of freedom is often associated with external circumstances, political rights, financial independence, or social liberties. But true freedom goes far deeper, existing not only in the external world but also in the way we think, act, and perceive life. To understand this profound inner freedom, we must first examine the concepts of conformity, the conditioning of society, and the inherent limitations of our thought processes. Conformity, the loss of individuality. From a young age, we are shaped by society's expectations, norms, and values. This process of socialization teaches us how to behave, what to believe, and how to think. On the surface, this seems necessary for the functioning of a stable society. However, as we conform to these external standards, we often lose touch with our true selves. Conformity discourages individuality, pushing us to fit into predefined molds. We begin to seek validation through others' opinions, fearing judgment or rejection if we deviate from the norm. This desire to belong, while natural, slowly erodes our capacity for independent thought and genuine self-expression. Over time, the layers of societal conditioning become so thick that we mistake them for our own identity. The authentic self becomes buried under the weight of collective expectations. To break free, we must first recognize how deeply this conformity has influenced our beliefs and behaviors. The conditioning of society. Societal conditioning is not just about following rules or customs, it goes deeper into how we perceive reality. From family structures and education systems to media and culture, we are constantly fed ideas that shape our worldview. We learn what is right and wrong, what success looks like, and what to fear. Our values and desires are molded by these external forces, often without our conscious awareness. This conditioning limits our potential because it binds us to a particular way of thinking and acting. We become prisoners of tradition, unable to see beyond what we have been taught. Our lives become repetitive cycles of following the patterns handed down to us, with little room for creativity, innovation, or deep self-inquiry. The more conditioned we are, the harder it is to imagine life beyond the known. We resist change, cling to the familiar, and fear anything that challenges our established beliefs. Yet, it is precisely this fear of the unknown that keeps us trapped in mental limitations. The limitations of thought. At the heart of societal conditioning lies the limitation of our thought processes. Thought, by its very nature, is conditioned by past experiences, memories, and knowledge. It is confined by what it already knows and understands, making it incapable of grasping the infinite possibilities that exist beyond the familiar. When we rely solely on thought to navigate life, we end up trapped in repetitive loops of analysis, comparison, and judgment. Thought cannot bring about true freedom because it is always bound by the past. It operates within the confines of what has already been experienced or learned, preventing us from experiencing life in its full, present reality. This limitation of thought is why so many spiritual teachers, philosophers, and thinkers have emphasized the importance of moving beyond intellectual understanding. True freedom requires us to transcend the mind's limitations and explore realms of consciousness untouched by conditioning. The quest for inner transformation. To achieve profound inner freedom, we must embark on a journey of self-discovery and transformation. This quest is not about rejecting society outright or abandoning the mind altogether, but rather about questioning the conditioning that governs our thoughts and actions. It involves a deep examination of the beliefs we hold, the assumptions we live by, and the fears that bind us. The journey toward freedom is ultimately an internal one. It requires us to step away from the known world, with its comforting certainties and familiar structures, and enter the realm of the unknown. This unknown is where true creativity, spontaneity, and insight reside. Breaking free from the constraints of the known. Freedom, in its truest sense, lies in breaking free from the mental and emotional constraints imposed by the known world. It is not about external liberation, but rather an internal transformation, a shift in consciousness that enables us to experience life without the filters of conformity, conditioning, and thought. This inner transformation brings with it a profound sense of peace, clarity, and understanding. It allows us to see the world as it is, not as society has conditioned us to see it. In this state of freedom, we are no longer bound by fear, attachment, or the need for validation. We become fully alive, fully present, and fully ourselves. Conclusion: the path to inner freedom begins with recognizing the ways in which society conditions us and limits our thought processes. By breaking free from the grip of conformity and moving beyond the limitations of thought, we open ourselves to the possibility of profound internal transformation. This journey is not easy, but it is essential for those who seek to live a life unbound by the constraints of the known world, a life of true freedom. Understanding psychological conditioning, how it shapes our thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors. Have you ever wondered why you react in a certain way to specific situations, or why certain fears or desires seem to pop up automatically? Much of what drives our actions, beliefs, and thoughts stems from a process known as psychological conditioning. This invisible mechanism is constantly at play in our lives, molding how we see the world and behave within it. Understanding psychological conditioning is key to understanding ourselves, our choices, and the patterns we live by. What is psychological conditioning? Psychological conditioning is a process by which our experiences, environment, and repeated patterns influence the way we think, behave, and perceive the world. It refers to how we develop habitual responses to certain stimuli, often without conscious awareness. This phenomenon starts early in life, right from when we are children, and continues throughout our lives, shaping our behaviors and beliefs. There are two main types of psychological conditioning: classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Classical conditioning is when a natural response becomes linked to a previously neutral stimulus. The famous example of this is Pavlov's dogs, who were trained to salivate when they heard a bell because they associated it with food. Operant conditioning, on the other hand, involves learning behaviors through rewards and punishments. A child who is praised for good behavior is more likely to repeat that behavior, while one who is reprimanded for certain actions may avoid them in the future. The role of psychological conditioning in our lives. Psychological conditioning plays a profound role in shaping our thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors. It is the lens through which we interpret the world and is a major factor in how we form our identities. Conditioning begins in childhood, influenced by our parents, teachers, peers, and the culture we grow up in. Over time, it creates a set of internal rules that govern our lives: what we believe is right or wrong, what makes us feel happy or anxious, and what we think we can or cannot achieve. Shaping beliefs. The power of repetition. One of the key ways conditioning shapes us is through the repetition of messages and experiences. For example, if a child is repeatedly told they are not good at math, they may grow up with a belief that they are inherently incapable of understanding mathematical concepts. This belief becomes a part of their identity, potentially influencing their academic choices and even career paths. Similarly, social conditioning affects our understanding of roles and behaviors. Consider gender roles. From an early age, many boys and girls are conditioned to believe they should behave in ways that align with traditional gender expectations, boys being encouraged to be tough and girls being encouraged to be nurturing. These messages are reinforced by family, media, and culture, shaping not only how individuals see themselves, but also how they interact with others. Influencing behaviors. The role of rewards and punishments. Operant conditioning influences behaviors by associating actions with rewards or punishments. This system is used extensively in parenting and education. When a child behaves in a manner that is seen as desirable, they may receive praise or a reward, encouraging them to repeat the behavior. Conversely, if they behave in a way deemed undesirable, they may face consequences, discouraging that behavior. Over time, these experiences form patterns of behavior, often guiding actions long into adulthood. For example, a person who was rewarded for academic success during childhood may grow up with a drive for achievement, constantly seeking validation through accomplishments. On the other hand, someone who was punished for expressing emotions might learn to suppress their feelings, leading to difficulties in emotional expression and relationship building later in life. Conditioning and fear responses. Psychological conditioning also plays a significant role in the development of fears and anxieties. If a person experiences a negative event, they may begin to associate similar situations with fear. Imagine a child who was bitten by a dog. They might grow up fearing all dogs, even if no other negative experience occurs. This conditioned fear becomes embedded in their psyche, influencing their future interactions with dogs, sometimes for the rest of their lives. Similarly, societal messages can condition us to fear failure. In many cultures, success is celebrated, while failure is frowned upon or stigmatized. Over time, we may develop an aversion to taking risks because we fear the shame associated with failure. This fear limits us, keeping us within our comfort zones and preventing us from pursuing new opportunities. The impact of conditioning on identity and relationships. Our sense of identity, who we believe we are, is largely shaped by conditioning. The roles we play, the values we hold, and the limitations we perceive are all influenced by the conditioning we have received. If someone is conditioned to believe that success is measured by material wealth, they may spend their life in pursuit of financial gain, even if it leaves them unfulfilled. If a person grows up with the message that showing vulnerability is a weakness, they may struggle to form meaningful relationships, keeping others at a distance to avoid appearing vulnerable. Conditioning also affects how we relate to others. We may be conditioned to behave in a way that seeks the approval of others, leading us to conform to social norms, even if those norms conflict with our authentic desires. For example, someone may follow a career path or enter a relationship because it is what their family or society expects of them, rather than because it aligns with their true passions and values. Breaking free from conditioning, Krishnamurti and other philosophers have argued that to truly understand ourselves, we must become aware of our conditioning and its influence on our lives. This awareness is the first step toward freedom from the habitual patterns that limit our potential and keep us from experiencing life authentically. Breaking free from conditioning does not mean rejecting everything we have learned. Instead, it involves questioning our beliefs and behaviors, exploring whether they align with our true selves, or if they are simply the result of conditioning. It is about cultivating awareness, observing our thoughts, emotions, and actions without judgment, and recognizing how much of what we do is driven by conditioned responses. For example, if you find yourself automatically reacting with anger when someone criticizes you, take a step back and ask why. Is this response rooted in a need to protect your self-image, something that has been conditioned in you since childhood? By questioning and understanding these reactions, you can begin to break free from the automatic patterns that govern your life, creating space for more conscious and authentic choices. Conclusion: conditioning and the journey to authenticity. Psychological conditioning is an inevitable part of being human. It shapes our thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors, influencing how we see ourselves and the world around us. While conditioning helps us navigate society and gives us a framework for understanding life, it can also limit our ability to live authentically and freely. To move beyond conditioning, we must first become aware of it. By observing our thoughts and behaviors without judgment and questioning the beliefs we hold, we can begin to see where our conditioning ends and where our true selves begin. This journey requires courage, as it often means stepping away from what feels comfortable and familiar, but it is also the path to true freedom and self-discovery. In breaking free from the constraints of conditioning, we open ourselves up to the possibility of living a life that is genuinely our own. How our upbringing, society, and education system condition us to conform from childhood. From the moment we are born, we enter a world filled with expectations, rules, and systems designed to mold us into what society deems acceptable. Our journey begins within the warmth of our family, extends through the structured environment of school, and is ultimately influenced by the norms of the broader society. This lifelong conditioning process, often unrecognized, shapes our thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors, turning us into individuals who fit within predetermined frameworks. Let's explore how upbringing, society, and education play pivotal roles in this conditioning process, and the impact it has on our sense of individuality. Upbringing, the foundation of belief. Our upbringing is the first and most powerful layer of conditioning we experience. From a young age, parents, guardians, and family members shape our view of the world. They teach us what is right and wrong, how to behave, what to believe, and even how to perceive ourselves. They pass on cultural traditions, religious beliefs, and values that have often been handed down for generations. In this environment, we learn what is expected of us, how to act in a respectable way, how to please others, and what paths in life are considered worthy of admiration. This upbringing aims to keep us safe and help us fit into society, but it often carries an unintended consequence. It limits our ability to explore ideas outside of these parameters, restricting our true potential. The beliefs we inherit are rarely questioned because they become an intrinsic part of our identity before we are even aware of who we are. Society, the reinforcement of norms. As we grow, we begin to interact with the broader society, which serves to reinforce the conditioning started in our homes. Society is like an invisible hand that subtly directs our choices, aspirations, and behaviors. Social norms dictate how we should behave to be considered successful, worthy, or even lovable. These norms influence everything, from the career paths we choose, to the way we present ourselves, to our definitions of success and happiness. The media, for example, plays a crucial role in this conditioning. It provides constant narratives of how people should look, act, and live, subtly creating pressures to conform. We internalize these messages, striving to fit into standards that may not align with our true nature. This creates a divide between who we are and who we believe we should be. The desire to belong often overrides our natural inclinations, leading us to conform to the expectations of society rather than following our own unique path. Education, a system of standardization. The education system, while essential for providing knowledge and skills, often operates as a tool of conformity. Schools are places where young minds are shaped to fit into the existing order of society. The system rewards compliance, obedience, and the ability to memorize and regurgitate information, rather than critical thinking, creativity, and self-discovery. From a young age, children are taught to follow rules, respect authority, and pursue predefined goals, often ones that lead to stable, conventional careers. The emphasis is on standardization rather than individuality. Grades, tests, and evaluations are used to measure students' abilities against a fixed standard, leaving little room for personal growth or the development of unique talents. The education system, in its current form, often teaches us to prioritize competition over collaboration and success over fulfillment. It discourages risk-taking and creativity, conditioning us to fear failure instead of embracing it as a part of growth. The consequence of conditioning, the loss of authenticity. The combined influence of upbringing, society, and education conditions us to conform to a particular image of what we should be. This conditioning often leads to a loss of authenticity. We may grow up following a path that feels safe, but leaves us unfulfilled. We might adopt beliefs that do not resonate with our true self simply because they were passed down to us or are widely accepted by society. The consequence of this is a disconnection from our inner selves. We may struggle to understand our real desires, passions, and values because they have been overshadowed by layers of conditioning. We might find ourselves living a life dictated by others' expectations rather than one that comes from a place of true understanding and self-awareness. Breaking free, a path toward true freedom, to live a life that is truly our own. It is essential to recognize and question the conditioning that has shaped us. This process requires awareness, observing our beliefs and behaviors without judgment and asking ourselves whether they truly align with who we are. It involves the courage to step away from societal expectations and explore what feels right for us, even if it means stepping into the unknown. Breaking free from conditioning does not mean rejecting everything we have learned, but rather discerning what is truly ours from what has been imposed upon us. It means understanding that while upbringing, society, and education shape us, they do not define us. True freedom lies in discovering our own path, beyond the constraints of what we have been taught to believe. It is in this freedom that we can begin to live authentically, connected to our true selves, and experience life in its fullest expression. True freedom, Breaking Free from Conditioning, a Krishnamurti Perspective. Jiddu Krishnamurti, an influential philosopher and spiritual teacher, devoted much of his life to understanding the nature of the human mind and the concept of freedom. He believed that genuine freedom is not merely about political independence or personal liberties. Instead, it lies in the profound, internal ability to break away from the psychological conditioning that defines and confines us. According to Krishnamurti, this conditioning, rooted in our upbringing, culture, and personal experiences, creates layers of beliefs, fears, and expectations that obscure our true essence. True freedom, therefore, requires that we question, unlearn, and break away from these patterns, ultimately embracing a state of pure awareness, understanding conditioning, the invisible chains. Conditioning is a natural part of life. It begins the moment we are born. Our parents, family, and society all play a role in shaping how we see the world. These influences, although often well-intentioned, create a set of beliefs and behaviors that guide us, sometimes without us even realizing it. For example, a child who is constantly praised for getting high grades at school might develop a deep need for external validation, equating self-worth with academic performance. Over time, this belief becomes ingrained, leading the person to measure their value solely by others' approval and their accomplishments. Such conditioning extends beyond family. Social norms, religious teachings, cultural expectations, and education systems all add layers to our conditioned selves. We are told what it means to be successful, how we should behave, and what goals we should aspire to. These ideas are often repeated so frequently that we accept them as undeniable truths, seldom questioning whether they align with our true nature or desires. Patterns formed in everyday life. Conditioning manifests itself in countless ways throughout our daily lives. Take, for instance, the idea of pursuing a respectable career. Many of us grow up with the belief that success is defined by financial security, status, and a stable career, often in fields like medicine, law, or business. These ideas are instilled in us through conversations at family gatherings, societal admiration of certain professions, and the structure of the education system that rewards conventional achievements. As a result, a young adult with a passion for art or music may feel pressured to abandon their dreams in favor of a safer career that meets the approval of family and society. In doing so, they sacrifice their true calling for the sake of conforming to expectations. Similarly, in relationships, we are often conditioned to believe in certain ideals about love and partnership. Many people grow up with the notion that being in a relationship is essential to feeling fulfilled, or that marriage is a necessary milestone for a complete life. This conditioning can lead us to enter relationships out of fear of loneliness or societal pressure, rather than a genuine connection. The desire to fit into the mold of what is socially acceptable can prevent us from exploring our own needs and desires in relationships, trapping us in patterns that do not serve us. Krishnamurti's call for true freedom. Krishnamurti argued that true freedom can only be achieved by breaking free from this conditioning. He believed that as long as we are driven by these inherited beliefs, fears, and desires, we remain prisoners to them, unable to experience life authentically. To him, freedom is not about rebelling against societal norms, but about deeply understanding and moving beyond the psychological conditioning that controls us. It's about seeing through the illusions that have been handed down to us and discovering our own truths. Krishnamurti invites us to observe our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors with awareness, without labeling them as right or wrong. By observing ourselves in this way, we can begin to see how much of what we think and do is influenced by the past, by the conditioning we have received. For instance, if we find ourselves feeling anxious about meeting someone else's expectations, we can pause and ask ourselves where this anxiety comes from. Is it rooted in a genuine desire to excel, or is it born from a fear of disappointing others, something that has been conditioned into us from childhood? Breaking free from conditioning also means letting go of the idea that we need to fit into the definitions of success, happiness, and love that have been handed to us. It involves cultivating an awareness that is free from judgment and exploring what truly matters to us. This kind of freedom is not easy to achieve. It requires us to question everything we have accepted without question and to step into the unknown, a space where we may not have clear answers or familiar structures to hold on to. Examples of breaking free: imagine an individual who has always been told that they must be strong and not show vulnerability, because real strength means not displaying emotions. As a result, they may have grown up suppressing their feelings, believing that expressing emotions is a sign of weakness. This conditioning can lead to emotional disconnect and even mental health struggles. However, through self-inquiry and awareness, this person might begin to see that true strength lies in embracing and understanding their emotions, rather than suppressing them. By breaking free from this conditioned belief, they allow themselves to experience a richer, more connected version of life. Another example might be someone who has always pursued financial success as their ultimate goal, conditioned to believe that money equals happiness. After years of chasing wealth, they may still feel unfulfilled, realizing that material success has not brought them the inner peace they were seeking. By questioning their conditioned beliefs about success and happiness, they might discover a desire to live more simply, pursue creative passions, or focus on meaningful relationships, shifting their life's direction towards something more genuine and fulfilling. Embracing the unknown, Krishnamurti's teachings emphasize that the journey toward true freedom requires us to embrace the unknown. Conditioning keeps us in the realm of the known, patterns, habits, beliefs that feel familiar but limit us. To break free, we must step into a state of awareness where we are open to new possibilities, unburdened by past experiences and fears. This openness is where we find the potential for genuine transformation, where we can finally live authentically, free from the constraints of the conditioned mind. Ultimately, true freedom, according to Krishnamurti, lies not in trying to change the world around us, but in changing how we perceive and interact with it. It is about liberating ourselves from the mental and emotional patterns that have been imposed upon us so that we can see, feel, and live life as it truly is, full of infinite possibilities beyond the limits of our conditioning.